This wasn't just a prison camp. It became the largest site of human loss in modern history. More than 1 million people entered its gates and lost everything: their names, their dignity, and their lives. The camp became a central part of the Nazi regime's brutal system. Families were separated the moment they arrived. Many were led into what looked like shower rooms, only to be killed. Others were used in horrific experiments, all in the name of ideology. This is the story of how Auschwitz came to represent one of the darkest chapters of the modern age. In the spring of 1940, as Germany tightened control over occupied Poland, SS officer Error Liebe Henschel was told to turn an old set of military buildings into a deadly institution. The chosen spot was a Polish town of Auschwitz I, known in German as Auschwitz. Its location was ideal for the Nazis. Rail lines from all over Europe met there, and the surrounding population had been forced out. There were barracks already in place, and water from the Vistula River was close by. On April 27, 1940, Heinrich Himmler signed the official order to create Auschwitz. The wording was dry and bureaucratic, hiding the terror that was about to begin. Rudolf Haas, a seasoned SS officer who had worked at Dachau, was made the first commandant. He was 39 and known for being highly organized and fully committed to Nazi beliefs. Later, in his own testimony, he described managing mass killings like running a factory. The first group of prisoners, 728 Polish political detainees, arrived on June 14, 1940, crammed into cattle cars. One of them, Tadeusz Sabelwicz, became prisoner number 220 and later shared his experience of those early days. The prisoners were forced to build the camp themselves, working under supervision from German overseers. By the end of that year, Auschwitz had already grown far beyond its original size. Auschwitz I, as the main section was called, held around 10,000 people in conditions meant to destroy them physically and mentally. Wooden bunks were packed with starving prisoners. Sanitation was almost non-existent, and disease spread quickly. Every day started at 4:30 a.m. with shouting and whistles. Roll calls could last hours, regardless of weather. Guards were quick to punish and used even minor excuses for cruelty. Prisoners were marched to factories, construction sites, or farms, often under threat from armed guards and dogs. The phrase, "work sets you free," was written above the gate, a false promise that masked the suffering inside. Survivors like psychiatrist Viktor Frankl later described how every detail of life in the camp was designed to take away dignity. People were shaved, given striped uniforms, and tattooed with numbers. Their names were erased, and their identities were lost. Each day became a routine of survival, in a place built to crush the human spirit. In March 1941, Himmler ordered the camp to grow. Construction began that fall on a new section, Auschwitz II-Birkenau, 3 kilometers away. It was massive, built to hold up to 125,000 people, and its true purpose was horrifying. This is where the Nazis developed their most lethal systems. The first mass killings began with Soviet prisoners of war. On September 3, 1941, about 600 Soviet prisoners and 250 Poles were locked in a basement and gassed with Zyklon B. The process was still being tested at that point and didn't always work as intended. Rudolf Haas noted that the method had to be refined for efficiency. What followed was a deadly system built for speed and scale. By early 1942, four large gas chamber and crematorium buildings had been built in Birkenau. 2 of them could burn 1,440 bodies per day, while the others handled around 768 each. On paper, the total capacity was over 4,400 bodies a day, but during intense periods, prisoners forced to run the crematoria so the number reached up to 8,000. The deception was intentional. People arriving by train were told they were being resettled for work. Young, healthy individuals were sent to forced labor. The elderly, children, and those seen as unfit were taken directly to gas chambers disguised as showers. SS guards maintained the illusion until the last moment, sometimes handing out soap or towels. Jewish prisoners known as Sonderkommando were forced to operate the machinery of death. Many later spoke about the unbearable reality of their work. One of them, Philip Muller, explained that after about 15 minutes in the gas chambers, all went silent. Then they had to remove and process the bodies. It was murder turned into a process, cold, organized, and efficient. The train ramp at Birkenau became the main point of entry for Jews from all over Nazi-occupied Europe. From 1942 on, trains arrived regularly, each carrying up to 3,000 people in sealed, overcrowded cars. The conditions on the journey were brutal, with no food, water, or bathrooms for days. Dr. Miklos Niisli, a Hungarian Jewish doctor forced to assist Nazi physicians, described how the trains arrived. The doors were thrown open and passengers were violently ordered out. In minutes, the cars were empty and selections began. Doctors like Joseph Mengele made quick decisions about who would live and who would die, often with a simple hand motion. The elderly, pregnant women, and others seen as weak were sent straight to their deaths. Italian survivor Primo Levi remembered his arrival in 1944. He noticed that within minutes, those considered strong were separated and the rest simply disappeared. The whole system was shockingly efficient. Trains arrived, people were sorted, and the killings happened within hours. Bodies were burned, belongings were stolen and sorted, and the site was made ready for the next group. Looting the possessions of victims became a major part of the operation. A warehouse area nicknamed Canada by prisoners, because Canada was seen as a land of wealth, was used to sort through the clothes, jewelry, and personal items of the dead. Mountains of shoes, glasses, and even children's toys told the story of lives cut short. Gold was melted down and sent to banks. Hair was used for industrial products. Everything had a purpose, and the scale of theft was massive. This had a deep emotional effect on the prisoners forced to do the work. One of them, Abraham Dragon, said it was the children's items that hurt the most. The camp also became a site of medical abuse. Block 10 was where doctors carried out experiments without consent. Karl Klauberg, a gynecologist, performed painful sterilization procedures on Jewish women without anesthesia. Many died or were left with permanent damage. A Jewish assistant later testified that the women screamed in agony. Another doctor, Horst Schumann, used extreme radiation to try to sterilize male and female prisoners. Many suffered severe burns and died from the exposure. These weren't the only experiments. Others included surgeries, deliberate infection with diseases, and studies on twins or people with genetic conditions, all done without care or ethics. Dr. Joseph Mengele, known to prisoners as the Angel of Death, was responsible for many of these experiments, especially on twins. Joseph Mengele arrived at Auschwitz in May 1943 and became known for his cruel experiments, especially on twins. He created a separate section for them and carried out procedures like chemical eye injections, surgeries without anesthesia, and disease infections. Many died. Survivor Eva Moses' corps recalled being injected multiple times a week, never knowing why. Mengele was often seen smiling or whistling during selections, deciding life or death casually. His actions, masked as science, had no real medical value, only feeding his personal ambitions. By October 1944, as Soviet forces neared, Sonderkommando prisoners, forced to work in the crematoria, knew they would soon be executed to erase evidence. They planned a revolt. On October 7th, they attacked guards at crematorium for using homemade explosives. The building was destroyed. At the same time, other prisoners tried to escape but were stopped. Roughly 450 were killed in the aftermath. For women who smuggled explosives, Alla Gertner, Estuja Wajblum, Regina Safferstad, and Rosa Robota were executed for their roles. In January 1945, the Nazis began evacuating Auschwitz. Around 58,000 prisoners were forced to march west in freezing conditions. Many wore only thin uniforms. Primo Levi, too sick to march, described hearing the sound of prisoners' wooden shoes fade into the night. Anyone who collapsed was shot. On January 27th, Soviet troops entered the camp and found about 7,000 survivors. They also discovered piles of personal belongings, human hair, and records detailing every part of the operation. The scale shocked even experienced soldiers. Records showed 1.3 million people were sent to Auschwitz. About 1.1 million were killed, including 960,000 Jews. Most were murdered within hours of arrival, never registered. Victims also included Roma, Soviet POWs, and others. Thousands worked to keep Auschwitz running,
from top SS commanders to guards and clerks. Many later claimed they were just following orders. Companies like IG Farben and Toff and Sons also profited from forced labor and crematoria contracts. In late 1944, Himmler ordered the destruction of the gas chambers. Prisoners were forced to dismantle buildings and burn bodies to hide the crimes. Despite these efforts, the truth remained. Survivors' documents and the ruins themselves ensured that Auschwitz could never be erased. The camp was built to destroy lives, but its memory stands as a warning for us never to forget.